Federal judges have now declared war on our republic. In February alone, more universal injunctions were issued against Trump than Biden faced in 3 years. Single district judges in blue states are trying to override the will of 80 million Americans who voted for real change. They're blocking border security, energy independence, and basic law enforcement with the stroke of a pen. Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley just exposed these black-robed tyrants in explosive Senate hearings that happened today that left liberal professors stammering. One judge thinks that she can dictate national immigration policy from her courtroom in Seattle. Another believes he can control federal hiring from Portland. The Constitution's under attack by the very people sworn to defend it. The judicial coup is real, and what you're about to see is going to shock you. So keep watching and don't look away. And just as rogue judges create inflammation in our constitutional system, your body faces its own inflammatory battles daily. That's where Dr. Josh's turmeric breakthrough changes everything. After 20 years helping hundreds of thousands of Americans escape chronic pain, this Connecticut pain doctor discovered a special turmeric extract that's 200 times more powerful than regular turmeric. This isn't just another supplement. It attacks pain at the source, turning it off like a light switch. Patients report pain not only goes away, but stays away. No more expensive surgeries or painful injections or ineffective medications. Visit goldenrevive.com/NNN to learn about this incredible turmeric hack that's giving people their lives back. It's linked below. And just as Dr. Josh's turmeric attacks inflammation at the source, we must attack the judicial inflammation destroying our constitutional order. What's happening in federal courtrooms isn't justice, it's insurrection by injunction. The Senate Judiciary hearing today exposed the full scope of this judicial coup. Joel, Alicea's testimony was devastating. During February alone, more universal injunctions were issued against Trump than in Biden's first 3 years combined. Every time Trump issues policy, a district judge immediately blocks it nationwide, forcing emergency appeals that flood the Supreme Court with rushed decisions. Watch.
During the month of February alone, more universal injunctions were issued against President Trump's policies than in the first 3 years of the Biden administration. The result has been an atmosphere of continuous emergency throughout the first few months of President Trump's second term. It seems as if every time the president issues a new policy, it is almost immediately followed by a district court issuing a universal injunction. Since the president cannot allow a single judge to dictate national policy, the administration has had to seek emergency intervention by a court of appeals. And whichever party loses in the Court of Appeals then seeks emergency intervention by the Supreme Court. The court has therefore been inundated with almost nonstop emergency litigation, partly because of the practice of universal injunctions. The seemingly unending stream of emergency petitions has forced the court to make quick decisions on controversial and contested legal questions, often without the benefit of oral argument, adequate briefing, or different views expressed by the lower courts.
The result is continuous emergency, and that's exactly what the left wants. Chaos through course, paralysis through procedure. Ted Cruz delivered a masterclass in exposing the scheme. He presented a perfect analogy. Imagine the government approves cutting trees for a pipeline. One camper files suit. The judge not only stops it for the camper, but blocks all tree cutting nationwide for anyone who might camp anywhere. That's not justice, that's judicial dictatorship. Watch.
We've seen district judges block President Trump's policies on immigration, energy, birthright citizenship, and even federal hiring and firing, all prior to any appellate review, all without any input from Congress, all from one single judge. Let me offer an analogy. Suppose the federal government approves a plan to cut down trees in a national forest to make way for a pipeline. One person who occasionally camps in that forest files a lawsuit. The judge not only grants relief to that individual, but certifies a putative class action on behalf of all campers nationwide and issues an order blocking any tree cutting in any forest used by any member of the putative class across all 50 states. Professor Blackman, is that consistent with the Constitution's design for judicial relief?
No, it is not.
Or is that rather a recipe for nationwide paralysis based on a single courtroom?
Yes.
Professor Blackman confirmed this violates the Constitution's design. It's a recipe for nationwide paralysis from a single courtroom. And Josh Hawley caught Professor Kate Shaw in stunning hypocrisy. She claims that judges can bind non-parties to their rulings since Marbury versus Madison. But when Biden's FDA rules on abortion pills got blocked, she called it a travesty for democracy and judicial impartiality. Her position changes based on who's president. Watch.
Let me just start with you, if I could, Professor Shaw. You talked about the fact that there have been lots of rulings against the Trump administration. That's absolutely statistically true. I disagree with almost all of them. In fact, I think all of them. But the issue of this hearing really isn't the rulings, is it? It's the remedies. Would you agree? And those are distinct things. You may think that the ruling is quite correct, but that's actually not what we're talking about here today. We could have a hearing on that. Maybe we should. But we're talking today about the remedy. And the question is a remedy that binds parties who are not before the court, is that an appropriate thing? I mean, aren't you concerned about judges binding non-parties in their remedies? You may love the ruling, but even if you do, don't you think it's a little bit anomalous for courts to be going out there and binding parties who are not before them? I mean, is that something we want to encourage?
Senator, I think that judges have been issuing rulings that impact non-parties since Marbury versus Madison, right?
So you're not concerned about it?
I'm not. I absolutely think that they can be abused, and
well,
they
no, wait
have
a
been
minute,
abused.
wait a minute. You were very concerned about it just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You said in response to a nationwide injunction on the Biden FDA's mifepristone rules, and I quote, "This injunction's a travesty for principles of democracy, notions of judicial impartiality, and the rule of law."
I think I've been consistent today. That was issued by Judge Kaczmarek in a single judge division. They're a problem. Those are a problem.
With him personally? Wait.
No.
So your testimony is if it's issued by Judge Kaczmarek, it's bad?
No, sir.
It's personal?
That is not my testimony.
So is the problem with the injunction? You were criticizing the universal injunction here.
Issued by a judge in a single judge division. I've been very clear today that those are a problem.
By a Republican judge in a Republican division, then it's bad.
No, Senator.
Otherwise, it's fine.
No, Senator. I think that single judge divisions
What is the
are a problem.
principal difference? I'm looking for a principle. I understand you hate the president. I understand you love all of these rulings against him. You and I both know that's not a principle. You're a lawyer. What's the principle that divides when issuing a nationwide injunction is okay, when it's not? When the Biden administration was subject to nationwide injunctions, you said that they were travesties for the principle of democracy. You didn't say the referral to Judge Kaczmarek was a travesty. You said his injunction was a travesty for principles of democracy.
Holly exposed her double standard perfectly. She's not concerned about judicial overreach. She's concerned about Trump winning. The liberal defense of this judicial activism is pathetic. Democrat Senator Whitehouse claimed that Trump-appointed judges are striking down his illegal actions, proving there is no conspiracy. But that's precisely the point. Even Republican-appointed judges are infected with this universal injunction disease, thinking they can govern from the bench. Watch.
Hearings like this prop up a narrative that bad courts are stopping dear leader Donald Trump because some cabal of Democratic judges is out to get him. Wrong. The reality is much simpler. He's breaking the law and doing it a lot, and judges are doing their job. It's not just me saying that. Trump-appointed judges from across the country have struck down his illegal actions, holding, for instance, that Trump can't punish the AP for its reporting, that his misuse of the Alien Enemies Act is illegal, and that the administration can't withhold billions of appropriated public health funds. Trump judges. Hardly a liberal conspiracy. As it tries to prop up Trump's illegal orders, the MAGA Justice Department is fast destroying its reputation with judges who've said about DOJ arguments, bad faith, shoddy, an admitted lack of any evidence whatsoever, deliberate evasion. Shocking not only to judges, but to the intuitive sense of liberty that Americans far removed from courthouses still hold dear. And the prospect of contempt findings looms. Fact number 2, failing in court, Donald Trump and his allies attack judges and their families. Trump has called judges who ruled against him communists, USA-hating, and monsters. A Republican in Congress put up a wanted poster with judges' faces outside his office.
White House admits that judges are doing their job by blocking the elected president. That's not their job. That's usurpation. Senator Welch went further, claiming that we're testing whether separation of powers will endure and accusing Congress of abdicating constitutional responsibility. He called judicial resistance to Trump's agenda Judges doing their jobs while attacking the president for criticizing them. Watch.
This moment we're in our country is testing whether the separation of powers, three co-equal branches of government, shall endure. That's really the question. We've seen an abdication of constitutional responsibility by the Congress. It's appalling. But the second leg of that, the transfer of authority to the executive, is the rampant attack on the judiciary. And Senator Cruz gave some examples of what he thought was judicial overreach. Each one of those examples, as I see it, was the judges doing their job. They disagreed. And when they disagreed, it was asserted by the president and by the attorney general that they were monsters, they were renegades, they were out of control. It was an ad hominem attack because judges were doing their jobs.
Translation: judges blocking the people's will is noble, but the president defending his constitutional authority is tyranny. Pure projection. The solutions proposed by conservative legal scholars are essential. Josh Blackman suggested automatic stays when universal injunctions are granted, giving the executive branch 24 to 48 hours to appeal before implementation. This would end the current chaos where presidents must scramble to emergency courts while policies hang in limbo. Watch.
I think one urgent need is to think about automatic stays. When you have district court judges granting universal injunctions and they don't stay their rulings, there's this frantic race to the Court of Appeals and to the Supreme Court, and the executive branch is not capable of actually changing policy on the fly, and that gives rise to these attempted contempt proceedings. I would think about if a universal injunction is granted or a nationwide class is granted, stay the ruling for 24 hours, 48 hours, some limited period till he's taken an appeal to the appellate court, and don't let the judge just rule against you to decide whether appeals to be taken. I think the automatic stay will go a long way to addressing these issues.
Professor Alicea.
I think beyond Rule 23 and the enforcement of Rule 23, it's important to address the scope of injunctions not just through the non-APA route, but also through the administrative procedure route under Section 706. So I think that to the extent that we're going to really address the problem overall, you can't just address universal injunctions that are done outside of the context of administrative action, but also through the process that the APA sets up for challenging agency action.
Thank you, Professor.
Automatic stays would restore sanity to the system. No more government by judicial ambush. And Senator Kennedy delivered the most memorable smackdown when he told Professor Shaw he has little respect for her opinion after reading her partisan writings. He noted that she thinks nationwide injunctions taste like pumpkin pie when used against Trump, but are tyranny when used against Biden. Watch.
An article the other day. I'm not suggesting it. I just want your opinions. That said, if a president, any president, issues an executive order, let's say, that clearly violates settled Supreme Court precedent, that a federal judge can't issue a nationwide injunction. For example, if a federal a president issued an order that said no one in America has right to counsel any longer, including but not limited to, in a felony case, having the government pay for your lawyer if you can't afford it. That clearly violates settled Gideon v. Wainwright. In that case, a judge has no authority or does have authority to issue a nationwide injunction. But in a case where the law is unclear, a judge should refrain from that. Now, obviously, we'd have to trust our judges, but we're supposed to be able to trust them anyway. What do you think about that?
I don't agree with that, Senator, because I think universal injunctions transgress the limitations under Article 3, even if the underlying merits are clear.
I happen to agree with you. I don't think there's any basis under Article 3, under Supreme Court precedent, under the English common law for nationwide injunctions. I think politicians have helped judges, and many judges are politicians, to just make it up. And many of them are like Professor Shaw here. If they like the president, they're against nationwide injunctions. If they don't like the president, they're for him. Professor, let me ask you.
Kennedy and Cruz exposed these professors as partisan hacks using fancy legal words to justify their political preferences. The most revealing exchange came when Cruz asked the panel if they'd advise clients to defy federal court orders. Only Shaw gave a qualified answer, suggesting there might be cases where defiance is justified. When pressed, she admitted she considered it for sufficiently egregious orders. Watch.
Would any of you advise a client to defy a federal court order?
No.
None of you would? How about you, Professor?
I mean, under most circumstances, we follow the government and private parties follow court orders. I suppose it's not, I would not rule out ever the possibility that in a sufficiently egregious order, there should be some consideration of whether there's a way.
So in some cases,
I think it's a qualified answer, yes.
In some cases you would.
In an extremely narrow band of cases, I think it would be considered, yes.
Okay. Do any of you think that nationwide or universal injunctions are not being abused?
I'm not sure what if I may, Senator, I'm not sure what the time horizon of the question is. I don't think that there could be good faith disagreements about the correctness of some of them, but I have not seen in the last 4 months abuse. No.
I've read your stuff and I've read your writings. I don't want to get bogged down with this, but I have little respect for your opinion because I've read your stuff. When someone is in the White House that you agree with and someone gets a universal injunction against him, you don't like universal injunctions. You called them judges acting like they're politicians in robes and judges looking like crass political actors. But now that President Trump's in the White House, who you dislike, you think that universal injunctions taste like pumpkin pie. So I have to discount what you say.
So liberal professors think defying conservative judges might be acceptable, but Trump must obey every activist ruling. The hypocrisy is breathtaking. Professor Shaw's testimony was particularly galling. She claimed the administration's losses in court prove its actions are painfully unlawful and celebrate cross-ideological consensus against Trump. She bragged that lower courts unanimously ruled against the administration on birthright citizenship. Watch.
These are not about policy disagreements. The reason there has been such wide and cross-ideological consensus over the impermissibility of the administration's actions is because the actions have been plainly unlawful, and that has been clear to jurists of all stripes. Again and again, the administration has acted in violation of both the constitutionally required process for lawmaking, one that gives Congress primacy, and the rights the Constitution commands government to respect. To be sure, some of these preliminary rulings against the government will be, and some have been, reversed or stayed on appeal. But it is telling that there are so many lower court losses that the administration has not even bothered to challenge. That is true in the birthright citizenship case currently pending in the Supreme Court, in which the lower courts have unanimously ruled against the administration. But the administration has not challenged those rulings on the merits. Instead, it has asked the court to use the case as an opportunity to restrict lower courts' ability to provide nationwide relief, and to do that in a context in which the administration is not even defending the lawfulness of its own executive order.
She admits the administration isn't even fighting some rulings on the merit, instead asking courts to limit their remedy power. Smart strategy. Expose the overreach. But this isn't about policy disagreements. It's about whether one district judge in Seattle can override the president, Congress, and 80 million voters. It's about whether courts can legislate from the bench, creating new rights and restrictions never passed by elected representatives. The founders never intended for federal judges to have this power. District courts are supposed to resolve disputes between parties before them, not set national policy. When judges issue universal injunctions, they're not interpreting law, they are making it. Every universal injunction is an attack on our republic itself. It says that one lawyer in a courtroom can override the entire nation's elected government. It transformed judges from arbiters to emperors. If you got value from this report, tap subscribe. It's time for my final thought. This judicial war on Trump isn't about law, it's about power. Unelected judges think they can override 80 million Americans who voted for change. They issue more injunctions in 1 month than Biden faced in years, paralyzing our government with procedural terrorism. Ted Cruz and Kennedy exposed their scheme perfectly. One activist judge shouldn't dictate policy for the entire nation. And these black-robed tyrants are destroying separation of powers, turning courtrooms into super legislatures. When liberal professors admit they consider defying court orders they disagree with while demanding Trump obey every activist ruling, the game's exposed. They don't care about law. They care about stopping Trump. The solution is simple: automatic stays, congressional action, and judges who remember they interpret the law, not make it. The Constitution belongs to we the people, not a handful of Harvard lawyers in robes. So here's the question for you. Should federal judges who issue nationwide injunctions be impeached for violating their constitutional limits? Drop your verdict in the comments below. And you can show your constitutional pride at shop.nextnewsnetwork.com.